Hi everyone, thanks for coming back for part 4. I just wanted to point out that when I said that Yom Kippur is the 10th day of the first month, I meant the first month when you consider Tishri, or the Feast of Trumpets, as being the beginning of the year, as Rosh Hashanah being the beginning of the year. Then that would make it the first month, and the 10th day of the first month would be Yom Kippur. But on the religious calendar, the 10th day of the first month would be the month of Nisan. And so this would actually fit the pattern also of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, because it was on the 10th day of the first month that the perfect lamb was chosen. So that would be the 10th day of the first month, and then the Passover was on the 14th, and the Feast of Unleavened Bread goes through to the 21st, and then the Feast of Tabernacles, which is a parallel to the Feast of Unleavened Bread, has 8 days, so that would go through to the 22nd, and so this fits the pattern because this is running from the 14th through to the 22nd, which fits the Feast of Unleavened Bread and the Feast of Tabernacles. And again, the 14 seems to be alluding to the 144,000, especially in this one, because this is actually an anagram of 144, and this is coming up in the book of Joshua, which means Jesus in the New Testament. And it's actually in verse 17 where it says, "Come ye up out of the Jordan." And of course it was in the Jordan River where Jesus was baptized. And then the other table that I did was coming up in Matthew 17, and this is where it talks about the transfiguration. But it was actually in Matthew 3 verse 17 where God spoke from heaven, and lo, a voice from heaven came saying, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." So this was recorded in Matthew 3:17 when Jesus was baptized in the Jordan River. And there's actually only 2 times in the New Testament where God spoke from heaven, and one was in Matthew 3:17, and the other was at the time of the Transfiguration, which is in Matthew 17. And you see that here in verse 5 where it says, "While he yet spake, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and behold, a voice out of the cloud, which said, This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased, hear ye him." So both times this happened in either verse 17 or chapter 17 when God spoke from heaven and said, "This is my beloved Son." And this is also making a mention of tabernacles here in this table. And so like I said earlier, this could be another possible time frame for the Lord's return. And so I'm going to go over this table, and as you can see it reads day, hour, year, Yahweh, Yesh, Jesus, come. There's 11 matches, and Jesus is up here at the top and coming up in the green. You see the word day coming up in the red, and then you see the word year coming up here in the lavender, the letters Y, E, A, R. It's crossing through the Y in Yahweh, which is coming up in ELS form with the letters Y, A, H, W, E, H. And then over here in the blue you have the word Yesh, which is short for Yeshua, and it's crossing through the word Yahweh. You see it in the blue with the letters Y, E, S, H, and then crossing through both Yahweh and Yesh, you see the words the Son of Man, and it's using the E in Yahweh and the H in Yesh to make the Son of Man over here. And then going through Yahweh, it says they knew him not. And then again, you have Yesh going through that as well. And then over here going through the R in year, you have the words Elijah must first come. You see come highlighted here in the yellow. So it says Elijah must first come, but Elijah is actually made up of the words El, which means God, and Yah, which means God or Yahweh. So it's saying God is God, or El is Yah, is what Elijah means. So it's really talking about God coming in this table, because that's what Elijah means. It means El is Yah. And over here it's saying Elijah indeed cometh. And then right under that it says Elijah is come. So it says it 3 times here that Elijah is coming, and Elijah means El is God. So it's really talking about God, and Yeshua is God, and both Yahweh and Yeshua are the Son of Man, because Yeshua is God that came in the flesh. So he's the Son of Man, and Yahweh is the Son of Man, because Yeshua is Yahweh in the flesh, that came in the flesh. And so it's really interesting how this table came up in Matthew 17. So again, it seems to be confirming the number 17, which apparently is referring to the year 17. And so I'm going to go ahead and read this matrix, and it's starting with verse 4, and it says, "And Peter answered and said unto Jesus, Lord, it is good for us to be here. If thou wilt, I will make here 3 tabernacles, one for thee, and one for Moses, and one for Elijah. While he was yet speaking, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and behold, a voice out of the cloud, saying, This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Hear ye him. And when the disciples heard it, they fell on their face and were sore afraid. And Jesus came and touched them and said, Arise and be not afraid. And lifting up their eyes, they saw no one save Jesus only. And as they were coming down from the mountain, Jesus commanded them, saying, Tell the vision to no man until the Son of Man be risen from the dead. And his disciples asked him, saying, Why then say the scribes that Elijah must first come? And he answered and said, Elijah indeed cometh, and shall restore all things. But I say unto you that Elijah is come already, and they knew him not, but did unto him whatsoever they would. Even so shall the Son of Man also suffer of them. Then understood the disciples that he spake unto them of John the Baptist. And I would submit he was also speaking of himself as well in this verse. And it's really interesting that it's talking about Elijah coming in 17:11, verse 11 here, but over here in 17:7, which is 77, is where Jesus came and touched them and said, Arise and be not afraid. So he's saying arise in verse 7, which makes 77. And of course, this is the year 77. And so this is all coming up in a table that says day, hour, year, Yahweh, Yesh, Jesus, come. So I don't know if God is giving us a clue to a day or a year, but it's interesting how all of these tables come up, and it's interesting how the number 17 seems to be consistent with a lot of these tables. And so in my next video, I want to go over Acts 27:33, because as I said earlier, I believe there's a clue in this table, and it's interesting that this Strong's Greek number 777 is only used one time, and it comes up in this verse. And it's interesting that what I suspected the scripture was talking about was actually confirmed by this article over here when I looked up the meaning of the number 276, because I noticed the number over here, 203 score and 16 souls, was actually the number 276, and so I was curious as to what the meaning of the number 276 was, and then when I read this article, it actually confirmed exactly what I thought this scripture was talking about. And I'm not sure when the article was written, but in the scripture we have the Strong's number 777 in the scripture, and like I said, what I think the scripture was talking about seemed to be confirmed by this number 276. So I want to talk about that in my next video. And this number in the Strong's is alluding to fasting, as you can see here, and it's also alluding to wheat, because this word means without wheat. And so I want to talk a little bit more about that in my next video, and also want to talk a little bit about the signs in the heavens that will be coming up in the next few days, but I'll have to do that in my next video, which will probably be tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. And so I just want to thank you all for watching this video, and God bless you all.